Good day, everyone. James Hicks here from Hicks New Media, and welcome to Perspectives in Focus, where we have long form conversations highlighting people, industries, and ideas and technologies that are making positive strides within society. Today is part two of our discussion regarding utilizing AI for social good and a collaborative effort between Intel Corporation and Enzolytics. Today, we're primarily going to be focusing on the white paper that was co-authored by both organizations. So I definitely wanted to make sure that that was known to everyone. Today, we will shine the light on Intel. We will focus on their perspective of the technology, the science, and the future of what I'm going to refer to as technology-enabled medical care. Before we even get started, look, let me go ahead and get focused. I wanted to give special shout out to the Discord and the Twitter squad that has been keenly watching and listening and responding positively to the stories we've been sharing. I reached out to that community, crowdsourced questions, and from those questions are going to be the questions that I'm going to position to Intel today. So my heartfelt appreciation to the folks that are behind the scenes and the folks that were here early prepping for this session. I thank you very much. With that being said, let me go ahead and get started. Let me bring on the man of the hour. We will dive into our conversations. As you see, we are going live this time, so feel free to again bring any questions that you may have on screen. We've already got the set agenda, but if something piques their interest in terms of what they're seeing from a comments perspective, we may bring that up. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Clifton Roberts, how are you, sir?
Hi, James. I'm going to apologize in advance. I tried to remain in the office, which I got some good feedback being outside. So it's kind of windy. So
no worries, no worries. Anytime you can get some fresh air and be outside, it's a good thing. It's all work.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Look, no, thank you, and thank you for all the work that you and your teams plural, are working on and doing. It's no small feat. It's nothing that should be overlooked. Now, I definitely wanted to make sure we had continuing conversations about the efforts that you're doing, and I think this second part, this part two, like we really scratched the surface at a couple of weeks ago, talking about everything from a macro level. But today, I really want to focus in on the Intel piece specifically, and you are definitely the person to dive into that. But before we start with the planned questions and answers, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you, and I'm gonna bring a screenshot on. You weren't ready for this, but I'm gonna throw this out, and I want to get your take on seeing this particular slide here. So May 27th, 12:30, we went online and we had the first session. Again, today we're not talking financials, we're not talking markets, we're not talking any of those types of things. But interestingly enough, right after our discussion, interest, awareness, all those great adjectives cause Enzolytics and the interest and the insight, the forward thinking of what Enzolytics is doing to really propel. When you see something like this, numbers don't lie, right? There used to be an old ESPN show called Numbers Don't Lie. You can't not see this. And I guess, what are your initial thoughts on this movement in the market that is clearly driven by our conversation?
Well, thank you for sharing this with me. I had no idea. Congratulations, I think, to the shareholders of Enzolytics and to the leadership team of Enzolytics. As a person that works within a corporation, I understand how important shareholder value is. So I work for Intel Corporation, and just for the sake of transparency, I personally am not a shareholder of Enzolytics, but I can appreciate something, and I think it's an honor for everybody involved to look at this graphic. And again, thank you so much for sharing this. It's incredible to me that to even think that something that I could speak to would be a catalyst, I guess, for that. But again, it's a testament to the work. I was talking to some folks at Intel, and I remember one of my colleagues saying, "You know what, Clifton? You've tapped into the HIV sentiment. You've tapped into people that either have been affected by HIV, or have been affected by some sort of virus. And the fact that you were able to marry public policy and the promise of work by companies like Enzolytics and our data platforms group, the promise of technologies within Intel, I think you've tapped into that." And I said, "Yeah, I think so." Because never have I seen more people passionate about changing this world. And initially, you can see people excited about shareholder value, but then you see the conversation shifting. I remember one comment where someone tweeted, they tagged me and said, "Initially, Clifton, I became a shareholder of this company because of the potential for profit, but um, my thinking has shifted, and I'm so glad that I am part of a company and a movement." Right. So that's my initial thought, James. I just want to say congratulations to folks that are probably in the audience that are looking at things like that. Me
Right.
personally, again, it's wonderful because all I have to do is focus on writing and influencing and developing thought leadership and developing vision and working with the likes of folks like Gadav Chandra, Charles Kurtopia. And you can imagine I've been with Intel for a long time,
Right.
and I get to work with so many brilliant people. I always say um, the thing that stands out to the most to me at Intel is working and learning from brilliant minds.
I love it. Never want to be the smartest person in the room, right? That's when you know you're in the wrong room. That's good stuff. So let's go ahead and get into it, Cliff. Handful of questions again. A number of them were curated from the community, but in the interest of time, we had to kind of consolidate things. So for question one, let me ask you this: Is healthcare considered a core competency for Intel moving forward? And if so, what types of strategic moves will be made to become a leader in this space?
Wow. That's a
We're not messing around, brother. We're coming straight
that
with some good stuff today. We're coming straight.
that came from the community. That's
Yes,
awesome.
yes,
That's a good question. So I think the best way to answer that is not only has healthcare become a core focus for Intel, but healthcare trends inform our efforts at Intel.
mm,
We've evolved our technology portfolio to serve the needs of the modern healthcare industry. And so, what you saw with the white paper, I think, is a focus on personalization of the healthcare industry. Um, in our health and life sciences group, which I'll talk about in a minute, is an actual business unit within Intel, and it's focused on other pillars outside of personalization of healthcare. And some of those pillars, now I'm going off memory, but care delivery and payment reform, um, patient engagement models like telehealth. Telehealth was huge. And if you think about telehealth, there's a lot of things policy wise that have to be addressed, which is HIPAA, protecting patient
mm,
information, confidential information, keeping our information private. Um, of course, another pillar would be security and management of security risks. And of course, finally, digital transformation, right? So outside of that personalization pillar, these are some of the other pillars that our health and life sciences group within Intel focuses on. And not only that, a typical healthcare organization, whether it's Enzolytics or whether it's a Kaiser Permanente, or, I mean, the, today, by all accounts, and if I have remember, I used to be global director of data policy. So, I've learned a lot about metrics and statistics, but from what I understand, a typical healthcare organization today gathers well over 8 petabytes of patient related data
mm.
every year, where storage of patient scan data accounts for much of that information. So statistics like this demonstrate the magnitude of the data deluge faced by the health industry. And in response, or as organizations respond, they're faced with an audacious challenge
Mm.
to one, determine the ideal data storage strategy to capture all of that information, and two, have the means to scale that storage solution to accommodate the perpetual growth of that data, of data volumes. And then if you add to that challenge, um, that healthcare providers must ensure that patient data remains secure and private, because as I've said, and as I shared with you in the last talk, privacy is at the core of who we are as individuals, right? And it's the most important thing to everyone, is the right to live a fruitful, happy, healthy, and private life. So as a data centric company, Intel being a data centric company, our technologies help what Naveen Shenoy, who is a general manager of our data platforms group and basically Nikhil's boss, right?
Okay.
Our technologies help to move, store, and process this data. Our technologies not only help to move, store, and process, but it helps to analyze this data, helps to transfer this type of data, and it helps to turn data into actionable insights. And not only actionable insights, but as you know, amazing experiences as well as competitive opportunities. So the short answer to that is yes. It not only has already become a competency for us, but we have a dedicated business unit um, for that. And by the way, I've been talking to our Intel Health and Life Sciences group, and they're very well aware of the paper. And as a matter of fact, I had to run it by them to even get the white paper published. And there's some other things that they want to do to kind of amplify and socialize the message as well.
Right.
So,
Right.
I'm not going to talk about that. I'll leave that
No.
up to them.
But
yeah.
but that's good clarity right there as well, because I think some of the concern, or some of the not concern, but some of the question was, how involved is Intel as a whole, right, in terms of what you're working on, and the charge that you're leading. And I think he just really answered that. It says, there really is kind of buy-in from Intel Corporation to move this technology forward, move these conversations forward, and full support of the white paper and things of that nature. So again, I think that's valuable that you did mention that. Let's talk about the white paper a little bit. The white paper
Sure.
introduced the audience to, I'm going to use these terms right, to P4 medicine. So let's dive a little deeper into that. And can you explain what is that technology angle, and why did the premise of P4 medicine set the tone for your work with Enzolytics?
Yeah, that. Great question, first of all. I remember collaborating with Nikhil and Dr. Chandra, Dr. Katropia, Mr. Katropia, Purvi, and we talked about actually we had talked about the promise, the path, the puzzle, which was what is the problem that we're trying to address, the path forward, what is the prescription from a public policy perspective, and then what's the pinnacle, how did we summarize all that. We sent it over to the Enzolytics team, and I think it was Dr. Chandra that came back and said, can we, let's add the premise of P4. And it's something that I learned. So the premise of P4 medicine is unique to doctors like Dr. Chandra, Dr. Katropia, or doctors that we work with across the board. However, internally here at Intel, as I mentioned, we have a health and life sciences business unit that has positioned a similar premise, which is called the triple aim. Now, I'll talk about that more in a minute. So when the P4 stuff came back and I was reading it and I shared it with Nikhil, I thought, this is perfect. And it was the Leroy Hood angle, right? It was talking about personalization and all of that. So you see, the way that health and life sciences work within Intel is health and life sciences are quite distinct in practice. especially when it comes to the use and impact of technology. Life sciences, in the broadest definition, is the study of living organisms. And when applied to the human population, um, life sciences embraces technological advancements to accelerate, uh, whether it's academic or industry innovation. It accelerates that. So it results in new medications, more effective medical equipment, and disease research. And so the other side of that is the healthcare, the health, and that focuses on human medical diagnosis and treatment, and when and where and how healthcare is delivered.
Mm.
So Intel was already bought into addressing complex issues in both health and life sciences internally. And like I said, the way we framed that is within the model of triple aim, which was defined by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. So imagine my surprise when I saw this alignment with P4, and that's why there was no debate. Oh yes, this should absolutely be in there, because there was something that was already aligned to what our own healthcare, our health and life sciences business unit was modeling,
Mm.
the framing of how our work in this space. And just to give you an idea of what the triple aim framework describes, it really describes an overall approach for an optimized health system. And you'll see some of the similarities, but it's better individualized care, improved population health, lower per capita health care, and improving the day-to-day work life of healthcare providers, which is something that, I think it's important, and I applaud Intel for even focusing on that. How can we also improve the work of healthcare providers? In essence, allowing healthcare providers the time and space to focus on humanity, to focus on empathy, compassion, core elements of the Hippocratic oath that all doctors
Mm-hmm.
take.
Mm-hmm.
So, so James, these same principles are underscored in the premise of P4 medicine section of the white paper. So when we started working with Dr. Chandra, Nikhil and I thought it was a perfect fit. So, and I have to share personally that the challenge when Dr. Chandra introduced the premise of P4 medicine, the challenge for me was to synthesize the premise, transitionally speaking, into the promise, which was the next section of the white paper.
Yeah.
And so that's when, Dr. Chandra, if he was here, he would tease me about this. But I remember him once I came up with that transition. He just said, Clifton, that is it. That's the mark. That was brilliant. And basically, what I was describing was the parallels of P4 medicine and technology. And that's when I said, where P4 medicine aims to be predictive, AI is programmed to be prognostic. Where P4 medicine seeks
Yeah.
preventative measures, AI is designed to be anticipatory. And when P4 medicine embraces personalized care, AI learns by being adaptive. And finally, where P4 medicine encourages physician and patient participation, AI thrives on being inclusive and participatory, right? So it just, it's rare that something comes together the way that it did,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I really enjoyed about um, the collaboration, and that's basically the technology angle for P4.
Thank you for that. And just kind of a perfect storm. I mean, it really is. And folks, I will again link to the white paper in the description of this session as well. So for those who haven't had the opportunity to read that, please take advantage of that, because it is incredibly insightful, and everything Clifton is talking about is very clearly written in there. Let me ask you another question, really from a futurist perspective, right? How soon do you think we will see AI being utilized to diagnose mental disorders?
Oh, James, you've definitely pulled on a heartstring
Mm.
with this question. I had shared in our last talk how the passing of my daughter Kindle reshaped the mission in my life. And I don't know if you recall, but I truly believe that with the adoption, the mass adoption of AI in emergency rooms, and especially specifically on October 29th, 2018, on that day, had there been that adoption in the AR, the outcome for Kindle would have been different. I 100% believe that with all my might. And I actually authored an op-ed, James, for Healthcare Business Today in March of last year, where I described an alternative scenario where Kindle approached the triage counter, staff authenticating her ID biometrically, and then quickly pulling up her history of mental illness,
Mm.
leading to an initial diagnosis. And then, even after being identified as potentially dangerous to herself or others, she could have benefited from technologies like machine learning, where AI algorithms could have immediately inferred a more precise medical diagnosis. And then, by actually plugging in her self-described symptoms into a model that's been trained on existing national health related data, right? Because she walked in saying, hey guys, I don't feel right. I'm hearing voices, and I just feel depressed and I feel alone. And she was the furthest thing from alone, James. You knew Kindle, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know how not alone she was. She grew up in a great household. Now, granted, there was some struggles, but she was the furthest from alone.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that 18-year-olds go through. But I believe that these AI inferences would have led to a diagnosis of suicidal ideations, or at least one within a range of codes that deal with cognition or perception or emotional state or behavior. And then I think based on this data driven diagnosis, she would have been admitted and treated rather than turned away with a brochure and a phone number.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question directly about how soon we could see AI being used or utilized to diagnose mental disorders, um, there's tremendous, and we're already seeing physical, what I call the physical manifestations
Mm.
of mental disorders being studied more closely by AI algorithms, specifically where changes in the brain are being analyzed more closely. To give you an example, James, um, a machine learning algorithm that was created at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville actually uses hospital admissions data, including age and gender and zip code and the type of medication that they take and diagnostic history to predict the likelihood of any given individual taking their own life. And as a matter of fact, in some of their clinical trials, using the data gathered from more than 5,000 patients who had been admitted to the hospital for either self harm or suicide attempts, the algorithm was actually 84% accurate at predicting whether someone would attempt suicide the following week, and 80% accurate at predicting whether someone would attempt suicide within the following 2 years. So think about that for a minute.
Mm.
80%, 84%. That means 8 out of 10 people would have been saved or were saved by that. And as a grieving parent, you always go through and you relive that day. I relive that day driving to work and getting the call and having to turn around and drive back home and wake up my wife at 5 a.m. in the morning and tell her,
Mm.
um, and only if she had been able to be one of those 8 out of 10 people, right? But there's tremendous promise, and there's research being done now with this study, with using technologies and constellations of technologies like artificial intelligence. As a matter of fact, in another experiment, researchers proved that even a smartphone coupled with an algorithmic monitoring device, monitoring user behavior over a period of time, could actually come up with similar diagnosis. And whether that's, social media activity, right? I actually had conversations with a gentleman in DC after meeting somebody. It was after attending a data coalition event, and there was a group of interactions. where I was introduced to somebody doing work in the area of suicide prevention,
Hmm.
and he is focused on skimming data of social media, right? So,
Okay.
I mean, there's a number of studies where universities, even Stanford University, did a study involving 200 teens, where teens who have been tracked since grade school get this experimental phone app that surveys them 3 times a day for 2 weeks with questions about their mood, right? Teens have it rough, right?
Yeah.
And we're in the age of a digital economy where they're being bullied online.
Right.
So, technology is so promising. I'm so thrilled to be a part of it, and I know that you know Kindle is smiling about the work that not only Intel is doing, but her dad is doing, and some of my colleagues at Intel as well.
Yeah. Look. I don't want to take for granted the heartfelt nature of that question and of the response, and I want to definitely say thank you for sharing the story, and I think it well, I don't think, I know it resonates with everyone who's listening, watching, hearing our discussion today, right? And really speaks to the value and the why you're so entrenched, involved in this whole aspect, right? So it's not just the next task that you're focusing on within the organization. Literally hits home. This really resonates with you from a personal perspective. So I really want folks to kind of understand that um, we're doing more than just talking here, right? This is actually, we're trying to put that dent in the universe. We're really looking at doing that next thing to prevent other teens from either going through situations like that. We're literally trying to prevent COVID. We're literally trying to prevent HIV, utilizing technology, utilizing medicine and science and things of that nature. So I really hope that that resonates with folks. And again, I I take it seriously for the fact again that kind of peeled the onion back and asked you that particular question. And I thank you, sir, for responding eloquent way that you did. Um,
Thank you, James.
let me ask you this question, kind of that tails off of that. What else about the work of Enzolytics drew you to one propose that white paper highlighting the company's work as a specific use case?
Yeah, wow. Um, Brilliant questions.
I can't
I'm
take
glad.
credit for all of them because I will definitely say again, it's the Discord and the Twitter squad that's out here, and they have been in my ear, and I told them that I would represent them well, hopefully. So
Yeah. Um, well, on top of what I mentioned just now about my daughter, right?
mm,
The tie-in between mental health or healthcare and artificial intelligence and the promise of artificial intelligence. Even in Nikhil's case, there's so many different use cases for Puma technology. When we start to get to a scale of data that is not even manageable by normal supercomputers, but we have to develop special hardware to find the relationships between pockets of data being analyzed by AI algorithms, right? We believe at Intel, as a data centric company, that the coming decade stands to deliver exceptional compute driven advances in the host of new areas. And now this isn't even me saying this. This is what I know of my company, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so proud to work for Intel. I mean, some of those new areas include rational drug discovery, targeted therapeutics, the whole omics, whether it's genomics or that type of thing, and then even infectious disease management, right? And so, if you look at rational drug discovery, for example, traditional drug discovery, and again, this is me having conversations with our health and life sciences folks, reading their white papers and aligning what it is that we did within this white paper to the data that is out there for employees like myself at Intel. But traditional drug discovery is based on trial and error methods, right? Of introducing various compounds to cells. Rational drug discovery, on the other hand, proceeds from hypothesis about how specific compounds will interact with specific biomolecular targets.
Mm.
So, so this process requires screening the biomolecular target against large libraries of drug compounds, and to look for factors such as whether a compound can even bind to a target and how strongly it binds and what effect it might have on that target. And then you have neural networks as part of these AI constellation of technologies, and even in some cases, deep learning algorithms that would play a critical role in these efforts. And what I saw initially, with the work of Enzolytics was exactly this. You know, I had mentioned in our last talk, James, excuse me, the wind is just, was that how this all started, right? And again, you know, as all of us do that have LinkedIn profiles, we go and we skim through. James, I see you on LinkedIn a lot, and I'll go in and peek in on you, right? And Dr. Chandra released some sort of article about their work. And so when we think about rational drug discovery, and what I knew about our work in the health and life sciences field, I'm like, wow, this is a company that's doing it. If you go to our AI for Social Good webpage, you'll see all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
examples of our collaboration with other companies doing that. Now, if we look at it, if we look at targeted therapeutics, right? Um, I'm no doctor, and you know, I wish Dr. Chandra was here because he can correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong. But
Right.
you know, him and his team, they're pioneering work as it relates to even this most crippling pandemic of ours. If we look at COVID-19, it's like one of the most crippling pandemics in the history, at least in our known history, right? I
Right.
mean, you can go back many years, but uh, I mean, it stopped us from flying. It stopped us. I mean, it stopped economies. You know, people were scared of each other. So our health and life sciences unit long ago identified the potential of targeted therapeutics, which blocks targeted molecules necessary to the processes of viral growth. And Dr. Chandra's work in Enzolytics and Dr. Katropria, underscored in the paper, serves as a novel use case in how targeted therapeutics seek only to block the biological pathways that viruses use,
Mm-hmm.
cellular reproduction, without necessarily doing all this damage. You know, I often, you know, my wife and I will be up late at night, and you know how those pharmaceutical ads will come up, and they'll say this, you know, you can take this for this, but side effects are
Right.
you'll lose your leg,
Yeah.
your
Right.
kidneys will fail, you know, your lungs will explode, right? I mean, so targeted therapeutics, I think, are very promising in that, in the way that they target a site. And while there is an increasing array of treatments around targeted therapeutics, um, you know, especially not just with viruses, but cancer research, the pace of advancement in this field will ultimately depend on the quality and performance of the analytic tools that are being used to evaluate these molecular targets.
Interesting. Okay.
So, so that's where we saw, you know, Dr. Chandra, his team, and it just was a novel use case, right? I
Yeah.
mean, um, HIV. I mean, that's been around for years and years and years. And you know, it's interesting, James, because what I used to say to myself, and I say the same thing sometimes with cancer. You'll get somebody to will come up and ask you to donate for HIV research or cancer research, and I'll never forget. It was a rapper named Waka Flocka.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the audience have ever heard of Waka Flocka, but he was talking about his shift to a vegan diet at one time. And I don't know, as you know, James, I've been a vegan for 23 years. And someone had asked him for a donation for um, you know, cancer. And he was like, how long has cancer been popping? When are they going to come up with the cure? You know, the type thing. And I just thought that was so interesting that you have this rapper, you know, talking about that. But yeah, it got to that point where we it's become so marginalized how many lives HIV has taken
Yeah. Yeah.
and how many lives coronavirus has taken. And we got to the point in the United States, James, where you would hear that 20,000 people died today, and you'd hear it so much every day that we're not freaking out, but really we should be.
Right.
Uh, think about the sphere of interconnectedness that caused, right? Yeah, of all those people dying, and then there were some other points I made about like genomics and population health and the impact of population health. Um, Once we did the white paper, Nikhil and I were talking to Dr. Chandra, and he was like introducing us to biologists in Estonia. There was one in particular named Rin Ihan, who is pioneering work to characterize and quantify biological molecules, which generates massive amounts of data. And as we learned more about her work, we realized how aligned her work in the area of omics or omics in population health impact was to Intel's position on genomics and population health. There's an article that I read that's public facing about Miss Ihan on Estonia's Post Times website, which describes a future in Estonia where the most radical and comprehensive solution in view of the future solutions of personal medicine would be if medical practitioners were able to analyze the full genome of as many people as possible. And to date, this is going to blow your mind. 200,000 people in Estonia have joined a gene pool, which is invaluable in a pandemic situation so that they can be analyzed. I would say 3 or 4 years ago, James, Intel, when I was global director of data policy, I became aware of Estonia's leadership in a digital economy. And I actually invited the chief information officer from Estonia at that time, Sim Sakut, to come and give a talk to our government's markets and trade group. And some of the work that they're doing there in the area of healthcare, in the area of cross-border data sharing, in the area of digital identity, in the area of privacy security, right, and data privacy is just phenomenal. So the type of work in the area of genomics that Dr. Chandra Enzolytics and even his sphere of influence that he was introducing us to, I think agrees with Intel's view on the matter. And we believe that as the gathering and analysis of data becomes easier and more affordable through technological advances, it becomes increasingly even more possible to establish baselines and norms across significant populations to quickly detect meaningful individual or small group variants, right? So there's that, but it's going to require the ability to process numbers and data samples at greater detail than what we've been accustomed to. And that's why we brought in Nikhil for the whole, Puma thing, because as we get into, I think the largest measurement of data is yottabyte, James. And if you think about a yottabyte of data would take up the entire state of Connecticut or something like that, right? These these are the
We're on a
types.
whole nother scale now, right? Definitely. Okay.
Yes, yes. And then finally, there's infectious disease management and defensive preventions. Way back in 1996, the National Science and Technology Council of the Executive Office issued a directive, and it was called NSTC-7, which declared that national and international capabilities for infectious disease surveillance, prevention, and response were inadequate to protect the health of U.S. citizens from emerging infectious diseases. And since then, research has flourished in antiviral drugs such as AIDS treatment. And as you learned from the last show, you have folks like Dr. Katropia, Dr. Chandra, who have devoted their entire lives, their blood, sweat, and tears to this exact type of research. So, in a nutshell, that is me as an academic and as a professional and as a data guy.
Right.
That has been my fascination with Dr. Chandra and the Enzolytics team.
I love that. I love that. Look, you know what? know the technology side, we know the Intel side, and we've dropped this name a number of times already within the last 40 or so minutes. So let's go ahead and give the people what they want.
Whoa.
Dr. Chandra, how you doing, sir?
Hello, how are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Welcome to the session. You were sitting behind the scenes and heard the accolades coming from myself and from Mr. Roberts. First and foremost, how are you doing, sir? Before we get into the business end of the conversation, I want to welcome you officially. And how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. As I said, always an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
No
A big
worries.
hello to you, James, and Clifton Roberts.
So it's I'm not even going to try to guess. What time is it in South Africa?
It's 10:43 p.m.
PM, and he's still looking good. Got the suit on, freshly shaved. I told you didn't have to shave, but you know what? That's all right. You, let let's go in a particular direction since I've got you for a short period of time, and again, you've heard the discussion thus far, and you've probably seen the comments that are going across the screen as well from the interested parties. But I want to ask you specifically, Dr. Chandra, from an AI perspective, what is Enzolytics working on next?
Sure. So before I start, the Enzolytics team would like to thank the leadership of Intel, Michelle South, Maria Romao, Clifton Roberts, and Nikhil Deshpande, and the other team in the Life Sciences Group for being a part of this leadership collaboration. We believe that containing and countering this pandemic requires a cooperative, transparent synergy of science, innovation, and technology, with full support for AI driven policies from the government. And to answer your question as to what's next, where we are headed with Enzolytics, I think Clifton has mentioned something that's really interesting, and that's something that we are also envisioning. So we are envisioning a consortium to translate the white paper into tangible clinical evidence of how AI can transform healthcare. So Intel, Enzolytics, and another entity in Estonia will be a part of this consortium. And what we will be doing is we're using artificial intelligence to assess the effects of genetics, nutrition, and the human microbiome on diseases.
Mm.
And the human microbiome, and I think Clifton has also sort of talked about it, so is an aggregate of all pathogenic and non-pathogenic microorganisms found within the human body. And the Yoda data, that the Yoda bytes, I think, that Clifton referred to. So human microbiome has about 100 trillion microorganisms that are more than the cells in the human body. So what we envision is looking specifically at the gut microbiome that contributes about 80% of the immune responses in humans. It impacts immunity, food metabolism, healing, and the response to medications. And this also has a role in other diseases such as obesity, diabetes, lung diseases, heart diseases, and cancer. So there's a plethora of diseases that are involved that we can sort of encompass with this sort of envisioned platform or consortium. But that being said, the first idea of this novel approach would be to identify factors contributing to the development of COVID-19, factors contributing to the severity of COVID-19, as to why patients get the severe form of COVID-19 in light of their genetics, the nutrition, and the microbiome data. Then we also want to look at how medicines and nutrition work in COVID-19. And lastly, what we want to do is look at the development of long COVID. And like there's a lot of patients who've recovered from COVID, but continue to have the long-term sequelae of COVID-19. So we want to look at these things. Excuse me. So what we want to do with this is we want to understand this current pandemic and also identify novel therapeutic targets for COVID-19. And in a sense, what we want to do with this study is we will also identify specific target for other diseases like diabetes, cancers, heart diseases. So, and this will become a blueprint for other deadly diseases. So, as I said, we mentioned in our white paper, this will become a true, tangible translation of how AI can transform healthcare. That's where we are. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, so that's where we are at right now.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Do a curveball at everyone. No one expected the doctor to show up. So we're giving the people what they want. But, gentlemen, I want to be cognizant of your time. And I know each of you have a full calendar and a lot of things going on. So I don't want to go over the allotted time that we initially had. Before we close, and I just say my final remarks, Doctor, since you are here, I didn't know if there was anything else specifically that you wanted to discuss in regards to anything that's going on, or if you just had some closing remarks in general that you'd like to say.
I would just like to thank the Intel team, the collaboration that we've had with them, and the amazing personalities there. And again, it's the human element of this effort and the endeavor that we've had. We've thoroughly enjoyed our interaction with them, and the whole idea of this collaboration has really driven us to find a solution to this current pandemic. And we again appreciate and thank the entire Intel team for this collaboration going forward.
Awesome. And Doctor, kind of as we spoke earlier this morning, right? A next session exclusively with you and your team talking from the Enzolytics perspective, right? About the medical advances, in any press announcements and any new therapeutics, et cetera, things of that nature. Let's get that scheduled. Let's get that on the calendar. Again, while the momentum is hot, strike while the iron is hot, whatever adjective that you want to use. But I will definitely be in touch with you to make sure that we continue that conversation. And again, come at it from the Enzolytics perspective so folks can have that as well.
Sure.
Mr. Roberts, do you have anything, sir, that you'd like to close with today?
Yeah, Dr. Chandra was thanking Intel. Well, we want to thank Dr. Chandra and folks like Dr. Katropria. One of the things that we quoted in the paper was the human side of it, right? And I'll never forget it, James. He explained to me, I remember the first time we all got on the phone and Dr. Katropria explained that back then, Clifton, in his Texas drawl, I think he's from Texas, right?
Yes.
He explained with his Southern accent, and you could tell he's a Southern gentleman. And he said, back then, Clifton, there weren't too many doctors that would treat patients coming in that would even they weren't even sure if they were diagnosed. But if there was a possibility they were diagnosed with HIV, there wasn't too many doctors that would treat them. And my healthcare, my care resulted in me just sitting at their bedside and holding their hands, putting my own life in jeopardy at that time. It wasn't. We all learned later that you can't get, it wasn't transmitted that way, but they didn't know.
Right.
And this man is a superhero, man. And that's what inspired me. That's what inspires us at Intel. You think of other things that we're doing, like, we had partnered with the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation to stop poachers in Africa from poaching animals using AI. And you know me, James, as a vegan of 23 years, I am a guy that walks the talk. I don't just say that I love animals. Like, I stopped eating them all. I stopped, all that. And it's those use cases and those stories that pull at our heartstrings, that speak to our hearts versus speaking just to our minds or speaking only to our pockets. And that's what I saw in learning about these wonderful men at Enzolytics. So I'm a huge fan of their work. I wish I was CEO of Intel. But we do have a wonderful CEO in Pat Gelsinger,
Yes.
and my goal is to work the right angles, socialize this work, because you got to think. I teased Dr. Chandra the other day. I'm like, wow, look at how much we've accomplished, and we've only been dating for 3 months. You know. But you know, my goal is to get it socialized. And I would add that for fans and constituents of the Enzolytics team, remember the number one ask and call to action is government side. You know, I think I can handle internally how to socialize it up, right? But outside of Intel, if we can get this socialized and make our representative understand that this is an issue that's very important to us, right? There was a new director named to the White House Office of HIV research, and I can't remember the name of the actual institute, but I've already reached out to someone in DC to reach out to him, right? I mean, these are the strategic things that I'm thinking about. So. And that's to socialize the white paper. Like, hey, Terry, we need to get this in front of this person and this person, right? So we want to remind your audience, James, of the call to action is to really be clever about how to get this issue in front of their representatives and go from there. So
awesome.
That's my word.
That hits the proverbial nail on the head, and I saw a comment come through asking how folks can help, and that literally is it, right? Stay vigilant, stay aware, stay passionate, and I'm speaking now to the folks that are watching now or on the replay. So I appreciate you for bringing that up, Cliff. That really resonates, gentlemen. I'm gonna say the exact same statement that I said a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. The world is watching, not just from the financial and from the investment possibilities down the road, but the very possibilities of harnessing the power of science and technology to rid society of some of the health-related ailments that have plagued us for so long. I really wanted to say that exact same thing again because it just rings true more and more as we continue down this journey, as we continue to have these conversations. For your time today, again, I say thank you. For the folks that were here to watch and experience this session, I say thank you. We will continue to move forward, and as the mantra, it seems, from the followers and the fans of this movement, onwards and upwards. Gentlemen, have a great day.
Thank you.